Alright everyone, hello. Now, to get into our herb of the month, I'd actually like to talk about one that, for the dreamy sign of Pisces, makes more sense than we'd think, and that is poppy. So, as y'all know, the history of poppy is a little complicated. Because it has opium in the sap, this is something that has been used to both heal and do a lot of harm. From way back in Sumer, like I'm talking in 3400 BC, the poppy seed and the poppy flower have been used for a lot of different things, and it spread from Sumer to Assyria, Babylon, Egypt, and even Rome. And a lot of people would use it not only to alleviate pain, but also to help them fall asleep, because the properties of this opium in poppy seeds is a depressant. It kind of slows down the body's nervous system. It blocks pain receptors. It does a lot of things that, when you are experiencing serious pain and distress, are pretty helpful, right, for most kinds of diseases. And that's, of course, talking about before we managed to concentrate it into some of the more common and heavily abused drugs like morphine, codeine, and later even heroin. However, it took a pretty long time to get to those drugs and cause the wild epidemic that we have now been having, both in America, Canada, and also in Latin America with the opioid crisis. Before that, it was only until 1804 that the actual opium itself got extracted out of that poppy sap, and it was done so by a German physician. And fun fact, morphine was actually named after the Greek god Morpheus, the god of sleep and dreams. It's long been known to help with falling asleep and just kind of taking over, especially when people are in serious pain. I'm sure maybe if you've watched Game of Thrones, you'll notice how when people are sick, they're given milk of the poppy.
Give the milk of the poppy.
Many places have used this as some kind of pain reliever. However, again, that doesn't mean that, these drugs that came out of this, despite the fact that for a time they were really helpful, that doesn't mean that they weren't dangerous, and that's exactly why we had this opioid crisis. Between all the way back in the 1800s, the Opium Wars between Britain and China, because Britain smuggled all kinds of drugs into China, and China had an obvious problem with that. But also later on to, more nowadays, where overprescription of morphine and other painkillers has led to serious addiction. Now it's not something, obviously, that people want to use a lot. However, obviously, if you are just ingesting regular poppy seeds, you're not going to have the problems that you get from isolated, concentrated pharmaceutical drugs like morphine. It is important to note, though, that if you have to do anything that involves a drug test, you do not want to eat poppy. It will show up on a drug test, and it will be very hard to explain to someone that no, you did not do hardcore drugs, you just had a poppy seed muffin. So be mindful of that. But another fun thing about poppy, specifically red poppies, is that you guys might have seen them before as a symbol of remembrance, and that's because in World War I, it was in a place called Flanders, France, where despite the fact that, a lot of people had fallen there, they dug a bunch of shallow graves, and those graves later had tons of red poppies grow on top of them. So even though it was this very tragic sight of death, it was also later this bright red ocean of flowers, which is poetic in a way. And there even was a US military official who wrote an entire poem about that specific field. And so with all that said, you may be wondering why I'm even bringing this up as the herb of the month. And again, that's because Pisces is a very dreamy sign. It's a sign of the last house of the zodiac, that sign of kind of the end of life. It's also a sign where the spiritual realm is really heightened. And so poppy, as poppy, not as any of its many byproducts and problematic things, poppy in magic, when carried or when consumed, poppy has been known to increase luck, fertility, wealth, and protection. And it's also, again, associated with death and rites of death as well. Another thing about poppy is that because it is, has a byproduct named after Morpheus, and because it is so associated with sleep and with healing, it's something that also can help with a lot of dream magic too. But as we've talked about before, when it comes to baneful kitchen magic, it's not at all just good magic that poppy can help with. It can also absolutely help with more baneful magic as well. Because it has those properties of dreams and sleep, you can absolutely turn that on its head and make it into something like nightmares or confusion, even drowsiness. Poppy is fantastic to put into sachets or poppets that you are trying to signify a target that you might help them either get better rest and heal, or get drowsy, unable to get out of bed, get confused, and have all kinds of spooky dreams and nightmares. And if we also think about, say, The Wizard of Oz, this is another time where pop culture shows us exactly what poppies do. This is when Dorothy falls down in a field of poppies and she gets kidnapped. Poppies. That's how the witch uses that magic there. So likewise, you can also use it to ensnare people, right? You can confuse and trap them in things, and that'll make it so that they can never really escape any labyrinth of illusion and dreams you put them in. Very Pisces-esque. When it comes to the culinary uses of poppy, this is a pretty easy one. It does get used in some sauces, like there are certain cuisines that use white poppy to thicken stews and such. There are also, I know, a German beef stew that does use apple and poppy in it. I tend to use that mixed with a bit of a French recipe, so I'll combine red wine and apple. I won't put in the poppy. However, you could do that if you wanted to, and it does add quite a unique flavor. My favorite place to use poppy seeds obviously would be in some kind of baked good. Lemon poppy seed muffins or lemon poppy seed cake is probably one of the most famous uses of it because it's so good, very refreshing for afternoon tea, especially when we get into these warmer months, right, in the spring and the summer. That bright citrusy flavor and the poppy seed go a long way. Again, as we get into this season of dreams and other such things, just keep in mind if you do decide to use poppy in any of your magical works that it is not something to be taken lightly. Oftentimes when I'm using the Marigold Tarot, which is a fantastic tarot deck, one of the biggest things about when poppy shows up in the art is that it can harm as much as it can heal. So think about those qualities and that duality of poppy this month as you go about doing your magic, and definitely think about incorporating some of that just in a magical sense, right? Or even in a culinary sense if you wanted to bake something with lemon poppy, especially for this new moon coming up in Pisces. So I hope this is helpful for you, and I'll see you guys next time for some more Kitchen Witch tips. See ya!